I'm Jazz Cole. I'm the president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated, a nonprofit specifically for the advancement of foreign language education and also helping people get opportunities through those foreign language abilities. I really want to talk about empathy in the sense of the power of language and how that it makes such a huge difference when you're actually able to communicate, when words just start becoming real. Just as in the process of learning a language, you do experience these points in time where the language becomes real to you. And that's just, from, like I said, from my perspective on that. And I wanted to kind of share my experience with learning Spanish, because I know that that's a language that's common for people to want to learn, and it is a language that is spoken by many people around the world, specifically in North and South America combined. So I remember when I first started learning Spanish, it was back when I was in college. It was around the time I was working on my bachelor's degree in apparel technical design. And I remember I had been inspired because I had been, so I've been working on this degree. It was my first quarter in that new program. And I remember my church was saying that they wanted to do a Spanish worship service because they're we're in Los Angeles, we're literally in downtown. They're we really want to communicate with more people, and we want to be able to bring Jesus to so many different people. If you're not a Christian, or you don't that you don't believe in specifically Christianity, that's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure I'm sharing my experience of how I came to experience the process of learning Spanish. So I did end up going to this service, and it was on a Tuesday night, and I was so excited because my friends were going, and I was oh, it's another language. I had not really fully invested myself in Spanish because since I was 5 years old, I was my only thing that I need to know is English and French, and I want to be a designer, and I'm going to go to Paris, and that was like I said, that was the life that I wanted to live when I was since I was 5 years old. Of course, later on I went to fashion school, and I did learn French to a certain degree, which I still do use on a regular basis. And when I went to this service, I was just thinking, I'm going because friends are going, and it's it's another language. I'm Jazz, language shouldn't be a reason why you don't go to church or why you don't, interact with people. Because my friends were at church, so I was of course I'm gonna go. Went, the music was great. I remember, really connecting with that, just because a lot of the songs that they sang were just basically Spanish versions of songs that we know in English. So the main thing is when you get to the message, that's when someone comes out and just, obviously, as you probably know, if you are a Christian, you know how church works. Eventually, someone gives a message, and it's usually 30 minutes. And I remember one of our pastors came out, and he delivered this message, and then eventually people were getting emotional, and I had no idea what anyone was getting emotional about. At that point in time, I only knew as much Spanish as Dora the Explorer taught me. I know how to say hola, I knew how to say adios, I know how to say hasta luego, hasta mañana. I know, any possible way of saying, bye. I knew how to say el baño, bathroom. I didn't really know how to make full sentences. I just knew words. I didn't know how to make any sentences out of any of that. Because I took I think when I was in middle school, they made us do electives. So we would do every quarter. I think the first quarter I did French, and I really, really liked that. And then the next semester we did another class, and then third quarter we did Spanish, and then another one. So I didn't remember as much from Spanish because I just knew I was really invested in French. So at the time I didn't really fully, I passed the class, of course. Spanish wasn't something that I just couldn't pass. I mean, language is something that is pretty easy for me, as you can tell as of now, going into 10 languages. But I was just not fully invested in it to the point where I wanted to actually continue learning. And so that's kind of why I dropped out of it. So I kind of was for a while that person that took Spanish for a semester and was just I don't really want to remember any of it. It was just, I didn't want to. I fully invested in French. And so when I first started learning, I only understood words. I didn't really understand anything else. So Afterwards, I went to dinner with some friends, and they were just talking about, I was like, oh, I'm from Honduras, and with my family, we speak Spanish, but I need to start speaking it more around like my friend group, because like I do, because he does have friends, and especially in Los Angeles, you're gonna find so many people who speak Spanish, in that community, but speaking it more often. There was, and I learned a little bit, and I was trying to learn. I said, what is the word? How do you say also? And she said, oh, también. I'm like, okay, that word. So I was trying to kind of like, even though I didn't fully understand all of the conversation, because it was going in and out of English and Spanish, because everyone was just kind of hyped from the service, so to say. And I was just like, I really want to be a part of this. I was kind of like, I can speak French just because it's related. I hope that it's related like by certain words. So, but again, like I wasn't fully a part of it, because French is related to Spanish by the fact that they have Latin roots, but it's not the same thing. So I was like, God, I just really want to learn some Spanish. I'm telling you, this is like God answering my prayers. That's why I have this sign here. This is actually, if any of you guys have ever wondered, who watch my videos and are wondering what this is, the sign says prier sans cesse, which basically means pray without ceasing. Again, if you're not a believer of Christ or God or whatever, again, that's not, I'm just sharing that as the fact that it is a part of who I am. Not to try to convert anybody. I always have to make sure I say that, because I don't want anyone commenting and saying, you're trying to convert me to Christianity or something like that. No, I'm just explaining, a big part of who I am. So I was like, as I have on this wall, pray without ceasing, one of my favorite verses. And I remember a couple days later, they were having move-ins for new roommates. And I remember this guy I came back from church. It was on a Sunday. He moved in on a Saturday. And then Saturday I was gone with my friend all day. And I came back late. And then I left early in the morning for church. And I came home late at night, and this guy was sitting on the couch. And I was like, oh, you must be the new roommate. He's like, I know I've been gone this whole time, but I haven't been able to meet you. And he's like, oh, I'm Ben. And I said, oh, Ben, nice to meet you. Where are you from? He said, I'm from Mexico. And I said, God, you just answered that prayer that quick. I wasn't really expecting you to answer it like that. So I took advantage of the fact that, that he was there. So he was there on exchange for a whole quarter. And so I remember we stayed up late at night. Like, he was doing homework, I was doing homework, but I was asking him so many questions about, his culture, his language. I even remember making the effort to actually learn some slang, because I was like, I should learn this just because it'll be fun. I remember because he tripped over something, and I said aguas, which is like slang for like watch out. And I was like, oh, and he's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you knew that. I was like, I just learned it today. And then I remember one time he came to ask me something, and I was like, because I'm very sarcastic. I'm gonna be honest with you. If you get really close to me as a friend, or as a really, as a person, I have like sarcasm is like very much like on point for me. So I remember he said, Jazz, I have a question for you. So I was like, okay, cool. What's your question? So he's about to ask it, and I said, me vale madre, which basically means like, I don't care. And I was like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. He's like, okay, so Jazz, me vale madre. And then I was like, oh no, I was just kidding. He said, oh, you just picked that up. Like, I'm so impressed. So and then his friend, his other friend was also there on exchange with him. So they basically would have dinner together. They would like make meals together. And as a college student who like basically was eating on the go all the time, I was like, how do you have time for this? Like, they would actually make dinner, and they would speak Spanish to each other. And I used to just like try to pick something up. I remember like when he first moved in, I actually like learned. I'm telling you, when you have friends or when you have roommates, you're motivated to learn because they're in your environment all the time, and you want to be a part of that. Again, and I think for me, the catalyst of going to LA was basically just being able to go to fashion school. I had my heart set on that since I was 5 years old, like I just said. So I think that was just a catalyst, and the way, like I said, I feel this way just because, spiritually, I do feel like, God does things for a reason. He placed certain interests in your life for a reason to get you to get where, he wants you to be. In the sense of, where I'm at now with M&P, I literally didn't expect to do this at all. This is not something I planned for myself. But when you live in LA and you meet people and you learn different languages, and not only that, but like, I'm that kind of person where I will learn your language just because I want to be a better friend. That's just who I am. And that's always how I've been. I always feel like it's important to make people feel inclusive. And just to be a little bit more vulnerable in that area is that I went from a very young age, I was bullied a lot. I was basically very much isolated from my peers. I had people who would act like they're my friends, and it would just be like this big joke. And I'm gonna tell you right now, bullying is real. It is not like something that like, like people might say, oh, bullying will toughen you up. No, it doesn't. It really can, put together like a lot of trauma of, feeling certain inadequacies. Like I have still, even today, I still feel like I have like ugly duckling syndrome. It's like I'm not, an awkward teen anymore. I'm actually a full-blown adult. And it's just, those kinds of things. So it really does affect me. So even for me, like instead of like, because I've heard the phrase like hurt people. For me, because of who I am, I just felt like that's just not the route to go. So I always try to make sure I make an effort to make people feel included, because I know what that's like. It's really awful, and it's just really not fun. So I feel like, when it comes to language, I felt like I wanted to learn it so I could be a part of conversations and basically and just feel included. You want to be included in things. I think that's just human nature. You want to be a part of something. And, I think that, with learning Spanish and then staying up all night, working on homework and asking him questions, I would ask him questions about grammar, and I would ask him questions about how they say certain things. Like, are there any slang that you've used like more than anything else? And and he actually inspired me to bring more things to our conversation. I remember I was looking up in my spare time between, homework and, my job. I was looking up on the internet. I was like, just things that, like slang or expressions and like things I could actually use when I communicate to him. I remember he even gave me some YouTube channels to look at. He's like, oh, you need to like try out this comedian. Like, I'm telling you, like when you have friends, just making friends with someone, they can give you recommendations, they can share things that they like. And not only that, but it's authentic stuff, because again, a native speaker just told you that this is something that is worth looking into. I remember when I was listening to Annalisa, which is an Italian artist. I do like her music, because it is pop music. But my friend was telling me, I had a roommate later on who we ended up living together, I think like up until before the pandemic. She was telling me, she said, stop listening to that. She's like, no, it's pop music. I hate pop music. Yeah, she's like, I hate pop music. So she said, okay, so I'm going to give you a playlist, my Spotify playlist of like music, because I want you to get a full aspect of the culture. And I actually listened to that. So when you have friends who give you recommendations, you want to actually like take them up on it. I remember I was listening to like these comedians that my friend, my friend from college gave me, and I actually talked about that. I'm like, I've learned, they say this word over and over and over. Like, what does that like mean? Like, I would always try to make sure I brought something to our conversation that made him feel like I was making an effort as a friend. And then later on, I ended up going to Mexico when I was, I think it was like for Day of the Dead weekend. I made this plan like 7 months in advance. I booked, and I'm telling you, if you book a flight to Mexico, especially through Delta, which is the only airline I feel like is worth flying. That's just my opinion. Again, everyone's entitled to their opinions. So if in the comments, if you want to tell me your favorite airline, that'd be also cool. To know what other people are flying. I've never flown Spirit because I've heard so many bad things. So I heard that they're cheap, but the thing is that like you don't get the inclusivities. Like with Delta, it may be more expensive, but I get like movies, and they're always like new release movies, and it's like you get them in like different subtitles, different audios. So I usually like to listen to that. And then I also would get like snacks and beverages and all these cool things. So Delta's like my number one. My friend from Mexico, we actually did get into arguments about that, because he was like, you just need to take a cheap flight and just get somewhere. Like the point is just to enjoy getting there. And I'm like, yes, I want to have a good experience there, but I also want to like not have a terrible experience in the journey of getting there. Those kinds of things. So I digress. But yeah. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that, like I just said, with just making sure you're just bringing something to the conversation. If you actually want to make friends in other countries, I do have a list of resources on our website under Make Friends. It's under the resource sections. I'll link it in below, but we have a resource section which shows you all the different ways of like from making friends to international news to music to all kinds of entertainment. That's just there to kind of get you started. But there's so many different apps that I've used to make friends. I mean, I even found someone who, we don't communicate a whole lot, but she is from France, And she actually reached out to me because she was in LA for a semester to learn English. And she was telling me that she found my profile because from the church that we go to, they have an Instagram. And so she looked up tagged photos and then found my profile. And she saw in my profile that it said that I spoke French and Spanish at the time, was just French and Spanish before I moved into other languages. And she reached out to me. She spoke in Franiol. It was mostly French, but then there was like some Spanish words in there. And she said she was half Mexican and half French because her dad's side of the family is Mexican and her mom's side of the family is all French. But they all live in France. And I said, oh, that's so great. I actually know both those languages. I know enough Spanish to be able to talk to her. But, we met for coffee and, we just happened to just connect that way. So if you're really wanting to, I'm going to tell you right now, if you will attract the kind of people that you are really trying to, you will attract the kind of people you want to be around. Because like I said, I wasn't expecting that person to reach out to me. I wasn't expecting to get a roommate who was from Mexico to teach me Spanish when I really wanted to learn Spanish. So, so there's that. And I just think that when I was, from having, from meeting my friend and then from learning Spanish, I remember that was the point where Spanish words became they weren't sounds, but they actually became real concrete thoughts. I remember when I was walking to class and I heard there was a woman with a stroller. It was like a toddler in it, and the toddler said aguas. It just she was asking for water. And the mom said, "Quieres agua?" You want water. And I know that was kind of a basic conversation to really, comprehend. But that was just wow, that was a moment where I was wow, Spanish is not just sounds of blah, 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 people just talking and I don't understand any of it. It's I'm starting to, these sounds are becoming coherent to me. And that's such a powerful thing. That's one of the reasons why I try to continue learning all these different languages, because it's there's so much power when it's wow, that's not sounds anymore. I'm actually hearing it and I can understand it. I remember when I was in a Lyft because I was at Union Station and I was visiting my friend in Glendale because she was going to do my hair at that time. And on the way, it was a Lyft pool because I like pools because not only because they're cheaper, but I always meet some different people. And there was a guy who was Puerto Rican and the driver was Guatemalan, and they were talking in Spanish about the fact that they hate that people think that they're from Mexico. And she said, oh, I'm from Guatemala. There's beautiful beaches and things like that. I didn't even know I understood all that. I was just sitting there in the back and I'm cool. And then when the first person got out of the car, I was sitting there and I was because first of all, it took her forever to find me because LA Union Station is just kind of crazy because they have specific places for Lyft drivers to go, and I didn't really. That was maybe my first or second time going there, so I was just confused. But also I remember her having to find me, and so when the passenger got out, I literally was the next person there, and I said in Spanish, thank you so much for your patience with finding me. I'm sorry for all of that. And she said, you speak Spanish? I was like, I speak, it's I understand it more than I can speak it just because I'm so used to hearing it. Because like I said, after being in LA and hearing it all the time, and then you start learning it, you just start understanding what you're hearing before. That's why when I talked about in the last episode with babies, they generally going to understand more before they speak, because you need to learn to listen before you speak, because if you don't listen, you don't know you don't know how the words are supposed to sound. That's why listening is very important. So the whole way through I was talking about language and culture, and she was saying something about, I heard you said something about you're from Guatemala, and we were talking about that. I'm just telling you right now, that was such an impactful conversation to me. It didn't probably meant nothing to her in the sense of, just this black person knowing Spanish, but at the same time for me it was wow, I literally just had a full-on conversation with someone. That was a really big marker for me, and I was kind of beginner at that time. And so it pushed me even more to learn it because I was surrounded by it all the time. And I think you also need to create that environment for yourself so that when you're, for example, in LA, putting yourself in situations, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. When I went to Mexico to visit this friend, this particular friend from Mexico who was my roommate on exchange, I was there for a whole week for Day of the Dead weekend, and there were times where he would leave me on my own because during the week he had to work. But I remember like sitting, like, it was uncomfortable. I was like, oh my gosh, you're gonna leave me, whatever. He's like, because I remember one time he told me I spoke basic Spanish, which is relatively true. But he would drop me off different places just to like places that I would actually like be able to like go. Like he's like, oh, you need to go to this place. Go here. I actually had a really good time. I mean, I got lost a couple of times, but at the end of the day, like I felt like I that's just how it is sometimes. You just gotta get lost in how things are. I mean, you really need to. I had such a great experience just by the fact that I was able to, meet some of his friends, and I got to go to this place, and I ended up buying like some books in Spanish, which I still have. I literally had such an amazing, enriching experience. I had this conversation with someone at a boba shop, and I literally, like I said, I was just not comfortable. I mean, when you're forced to do, like, I'm telling you, yes, it's uncomfortable, but when you're forced to be in positions where you need to speak another language, you literally are, you know so much more than you think you do, because you're hearing it all the time. I mean, I was in my friend's house and they were speaking Spanish to each other, and I said when I first got there, I spoke to my friend's mother in Spanish. It's like, Mom, this is Jazz. And I said, oh, encantada de conocerte. And she's like, oh my gosh, you speak Spanish. Oh my gosh, and she's like, oh, your friend is trying to speak to us in Spanish. And I would say, yes, speak to me in Spanish. Es mi tercer idioma de ocho. At the time it was 8 before I learned 2 more. Those are my 2 languages that I know. That's my 3rd language. But it's, I'm wanting to learn it as much as possible. I came here for, of course, to visit my friend, but at the same time, I want to get to know your culture a lot more. So they would speak to me in Spanish. They would obviously speak slower and, with simpler dialogue. And I understood a lot. I felt like, when you put yourself in situations, you put yourself in challenges that are going to bring out the best in you. And I feel like that's, there's a quote that I remember, I don't forget who it's from, but it's so true. It says, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And when I came back, I was so sad because I was just like, I had such a good time. I was just getting good. And, I had to leave at the end of that week. And I'm gonna be honest with you, it was the best experience. Also, not to mention the cost of living is so much lower. So I was so thrown off because I used the dollar sign, but I was like, $50? They're like, no, it's 50 pesos. 50 pesos is like $2.50. I was like, wow. I was like, wow, that's really affordable. And then I don't know. I just feel like it's just, when you're putting yourself in positions like that, you like I said, you're forced to use what you know. Because when I'm in places where people do speak English, but they also speak Spanish, sometimes I'm tempted to like revert back into English if there's certain words I don't know. When you're around people who don't speak English, you're forcing yourself to really think hard about what you do know. Like I always would think about what I was going to say before I said it. So I'm like, okay, Jazz, just this is what I know how to say. Let's do it. I would use, I wouldn't necessarily use Google Translate. I would use I use word reference. Like when I was like, I want to know if this is the right word to use in this context. We also have translation tools that will help you in case you need that in the description. So really and truly, I think that the main thing is that there's really a lot of power in being able to talk about these different things, because really and truly, I'm thinking, like I said, is that you're more inspired to learn a language even more when you have a friend and you have someone that you want to communicate with. And there's a whole part, I'm going to tell you right now, especially if you have a spouse, because I actually have tutored German to someone who's actually she's a board member of our organization. But it started off with me teaching her German so that she can have a better relationship with her husband and his family. Because again, when you're in part of different relationships with different cultures, there's things that you're really going to need to know, because you don't want to just have a relationship with someone or be friends with someone and not know who they are, because there's certain things that you might do as an American that may throw them off. That's how misunderstandings can happen. But the more that we try to understand people, the more that we are able to, I think, really just see like the best of like what's out there. In America's not like the greatest country in the world. I mean, when I say that is, what I mean is that America is not like the catch-all be-all. I mean, there are a lot of countries out there that have really rich cultures. And so the more that we realize that, the more we can create a more inclusive and really just create a really inclusive and very peaceful society. It's like world peace just seems like it's based on where we are in life. World peace is something that, may not always be attainable. But I will say that learning languages and traveling and meeting people and just opening up your mind to the fact that there are people out there that may have, that may be different than you, but recognizing that that's a good thing, and that also can change you in the sense of how you view the world. And it's always a positive thing. So it gets us closer to world peace. But yeah, so I know this went over a little over time, but I really felt like that was important to say. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope this helps you at any point with your language learning journey. If you have any questions or anything like that, I'm doing I have a podcast with my mom's radio station, F&F Communications, called Can You Translate That? And next week on let me see what day that is, so that you know, it would be the 5th of September. We're doing a live episode of Ask a Multilingual. So if you're on social media, use the hashtag Ask a Multilingual, and I may just in that 30-minute time that I have on the show, I will answer your questions, whether it be language learning, traveling. I don't care what it is. Like, even if it's something about my opinions on something, you're more than welcome to ask. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.